Hey everybody, it's Tim. This is a introductory episode for the Peep show, and I just want to talk about exactly what the word peep means in terms of the vehicle community. Um, some people are not familiar with the term peep versus the word Jeep, and I thought I would dive into that and explain at least what my own research and thoughts on that are. Now, in general terms, a Peep is an early military quarter-ton vehicle that many people will call a Jeep. Now, early in the days of military vehicles, there weren't set nicknames for things. Eventually, the quarter-ton vehicle by the end of World War II was pretty much called Jeep. But when it first arrived on the scene, there wasn't any sort of a consensus on what these things would be called other than quarter tons or maybe manufacturer Bantam or Willys, Ford or whatever. So I thought I would dive into that subject since everyone has a stance and opinion on where the word Jeep came from, whether it be GP, Popeye, things like that. I personally am very much of the Popeye school that, the Eugene the Jeep name was out there for 3 or 4 years, well before the vehicle appeared, and that probably boosted its use in the American lexicon. This isn't so much history, this is more American studies. History being just pure um, facts, figures, dates, documents, things like that, whereas American studies is more about usage and culture, and this is more of a cultural thing. Um, let's also kind of frame a few other things about the World War II generation. First off, I don't know how useful dictionary definitions are. I'm going to go over some of them, but during this time frame, I looked it up. That roughly in the late 30s, going into the beginning of World War II, roughly 70% of the teenage population, school age population, went to high school, and roughly half of them graduated. Now, in the 1930s, those numbers were rising, and it was more like maybe 30% to 50% graduation, and then eventually it went up to 50 to 75. That may have been a result of the Great Depression, uh, lack of jobs, things like that. But people were generally a little more educated, but still, with half of your population having a high school diploma, I don't think that dictionaries are that useful in this. People who went to college were roughly about a quarter of the high school graduation rate at that point. So that would be roughly about 12.5% went to college. That doesn't mean they finished either. So really your college completion rate be well below 10%, probably around half of that. So, but okay, so let's just go into kind of the long-term meanings of the word peep. So I'm gonna go ahead and screen share. And so you have to look at the word peep. It's used both as a verb and as a noun. And so as a verb, it would be action. And to peep could be looking through a window. There's the song, Jeepers Creepers, where'd you get those peepers? Now, peepers would be a noun that's derived from the verb peep, peeper. Peep, be use your eyes. And then also a peep is a sound that a bird makes, a small bird. So that bird goes peep, peep, peep. There's some other uses in 1930s, in the 1930s lexicon, and that would come from nursery rhymes. There's little Bo Peep who has lost her sheep. Now, the name Bo Peep probably derived from it just rhymed with sheep. But also the phrase little Bo Peep says something too, in that the word peep was already framed by the word little. So something that peeps or is a peep is probably smaller than than uh, than a sheep. Or well, that's not quite accurate, but it implies that it's diminutive, like something that is peep is smaller. So now let's look into some of these nouns here. To give a peep means to give a glance or a look at someone. A peep of the day, you look out the window and you get your peep of the day. You go down here, and this one is actually rather fascinating, and that would be, let me go back to sharing my screen, would be these things. This is a dice, and on it, it's got 4 peeps. The side's got 5. So each of these individual divots are called a peep. So that was another use in the lexicon of the 1940s. And there are some other things that are also out there that could be useful in this. So let me go to this one. So this is just another dictionary definition, and the noun is a high-pitched, feeble sound made by a young bird or mammal. Again, it implies something smaller, younger, slight sound or utterance. But then you come into this definition: North American informal, a small sandpiper or small wading bird. So actually a peep was a small bird. And again, this is a sandpiper. They're found all over the United States in various forms. The northern half of the United States, they tend to be more migratory. They also tend to be available in Southern America, readily available in South United States, rather than South America. Although they are in Central America and I believe Northern South America. So, okay. So there are some things that are already out there. And there are some books that shed a little bit of light on it, not directly, but of course, then there's the War Baby book, which is by William Spear. If you don't have this book, it's pretty good about the early bantam and really kind of how bantam. But thick book, it's a good read, good to have. And Paul Bruno has 2 books out there. The Original Jeep. This is the one I would recommend specifically for this story. So he goes through the different contracts and things of the Bantam, Willys, and Ford early Jeep contracts. They come up on the actual final contract, which was awarded in the summer of 1941. So military vehicle, let me just kind of go through my whole thesis here. Military vehicles were really not a large part of the U.S. military. The U.S. military was transitioning in the 1930s from horses to mechanical vehicles. And so mechanical vehicles were out there, and they were produced by a number of companies, Dodge, Marmon Harrington, and some others. And the small military vehicle, which vehicle really was not even a concept, serious concept, until the spring of 1940. And then by summer of 1940, specifications were thrown out there. Willys and Bantam bid at it. Ford was prodded into also looking at it. But really the primary military vehicle going into 1940 would have been the Dodge half-ton series, and they would be really the VCs. And Dodge was a steady producer of military vehicles, and there were some others that were out there, but there's and Dodge already produced a pretty decent sized work truck that met the needs of the Army with some modifications. So, and the nickname of Jeep stuck on a lot of those. Now, where does Jeep come from? Again, I mentioned that earlier, but the term Jeep at this point most likely meant any military vehicle, smaller than a full-sized Army truck. So the half-ton Dodges, VCs, and then later the WCs were called Jeeps, going into 1940 and really through the end of 1941. Now, so what happens when these other vehicles come along? Well, so if you look through some of the court cases, and it's actually pretty well documented that the the Willys Overland Company, when they were doing their copyright, had lots of statements in their court case about about where the name came from. Of course, all their statements are going to be pro Jeep because there's a lot of money involved. But also the term Peep was definitely out there too. And let me just show you some articles that were out there. Okay, top. Okay, there are these articles that are out there. And all of these are in like the early 1942 time frame. Right. Yes. Here we go. Peeps and Jeeps. This is from 15 January 1942. And basically just discusses what names are, things like that. So that's early 42. Let's go to this one. This one is April, let's zoom in a little bit here. April the 22nd, 1942, when a Jeep is a Peep. Terms Jeep and Peep have been synonymously used to designate the midget combat cars of the United States Army, but the nomenclature of the Armored Division is different between the two. Now, there is discussion that maybe the Armored Force continued to call them Peeps, whereas the rest of the Army called them Jeeps. The Peep is a lighter car capable of riding roughshod over almost any obstacle in the field. It is sometimes called the son of a Jeep. Jeep is the 1 1/2 ton command car in which the brass hats ride. I'm not sure what a 1 1/2 ton command car is. I'm pretty sure they're talking about the half. Clearly, that's what's in the picture. But anyway, this is way into 1940 April, 4 months to it. I can change it. Again, this is another article. It doesn't have any date on it. Jeep and Peep were once slang for small armored cars that have been legitimized and are now appear in the dictionary. Jeep is officially as a half-ton armored car with 9-inch ground clearance capable of carrying 5 fully equipped soldiers. Jeeps have leather seats and good springs. So I'm not sure what a half-ton armored car is. Peep is a quarter-ton command and reconnaissance car can carry 4 men. Okay, this is clearly the quarter-ton vehicle, but this one, I'm not sure what the half-ton armored car is, but that sounds much more leather seats and good springs. That sounds like a half-ton command car. So that's normal. Jeep or Peep, Army editors cannot decide. This is April 16. There isn't a year on it, but I'm guessing April 16th would be 1942 to go with the other article that was. So here, the Army is hopelessly divided on the proper definition of a Jeep. That the little brown buggy that hops, skips, and jumps with its soldiers. Dr. Charles E. Funk, the lexiconographer, that sounds like a great job, lexiconographer, has announced the new dictionary will recognize the The Jeep is a four-wheel drive car of 1/2 to 1.5 ton capacity for reconnaissance and other Army duty. Okay, so that covers the quarter-ton Jeep and the Dodges also. A survey of Army camp editors in 30 states today agreed that only 24.6% of them agreed with such a definition be handed down on future generations. And the origination of the Bantam cars, 27.9% listed in the questionnaire. 9.8% said Jeeps are not Peeps. 6.3% replied Jeeps are Peeps. 4.9% answered an animal on wheels. An animal on wheels. And 27.9% cast their user definitions other than those listed in the questionnaire. So that definitely clears it up, right? And then here's actually a model that somebody posted somewhere of a cardboard cutout model of a Jeep. Peep Jeep. Okay. So what is a Peep versus a Jeep, and why did it go from one to the other? Well, first off, I think it was very localized. It's not like these guys posted on Instagram, hey, we got in this new Jeep or we got in this Peep, and then it spread immediately. I mean, these vehicles were eventually sent all over the United States to different training bases. Now, in 1941, a Jeep was clearly, if it was anything, it was probably a half-ton Dodge. And it may have been the slightly larger Dodge, up to 1.5 ton Dodge, because Dodge did build 1.5 ton trucks in 1940, or roughly about the same time as the series under a different title, different V number. But when you get into and by the time you get to late 1940, you've got some different quarter-ton prototypes going out there. You've got Bantam. They had their WC60 series, pops out, about 70 vehicles. You've got the Willys Quad that comes out in November. And, the Bantam prototype didn't come out until the end of September. I think the 21st of September is when it left Butler, PA, and then it arrives at Holabird on the 23rd. Understand that these early Jeeps really weren't that far out into the service, into the field. That in the Bantam BRC 60s were made in November, December of 1940, and it's not as if they put those on the on interstate highway and got those immediately to military base. They probably went out by rail car and auto cars, the old school kind with the double doors, or they were hauled on car haulers. And there's no interstate highway, so it takes forever for those things to get moved around. So it would not surprise me if it would take a vehicle a minimum of a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to actually arrive at its destination. So when you do that, these vehicles aren't popping into the system until early December of 1940, if not 1941. Now, also the Ford vehicle, I believe they had the Pygmy prototype was in maybe November 1940. And again, don't hold me to all these dates. I'm just giving you a rough timeline here. But in the 1,500 prototype vehicles, prototype production vehicles, the Ford GP, the Bantam BRC 40, got that right, 40, and also Willys MA. Ford doesn't start the GP, I believe, until February. And meanwhile, Bantam regears for the 40 in the spring of 1941. And the Willys MA doesn't really even come out until June of 1941. Meanwhile, Dodge production has ramped up, and Dodge has switched from the VC to the WC series, and they're cranking out those vehicles. My WC8, which was something like the 10,000th military vehicle produced. I'll have to check on that. But there, maybe it's 40,000th. Anyway, there's a photograph of WC8s all sitting there in May, and the Dodge rep is handing the key to the Army representative, and they're loading them in the back, and that is May. So Dodge has been in full production, and those vehicles have been in the field in larger numbers. So if you look at photos from that period, you're most likely going to see, if there's any newer military vehicles there, they're probably going to be Dodge VCs or WCs, and maybe a couple here and there. So Jeeps were there, Dodges were there first, and they were there for several months. Or these other vehicles, the quarter-ton vehicles, start going up, and they start to kind of flood the service in the spring to summer of 1941. So, and then you actually don't start getting the full production Jeeps. I mean, Willys gets the contract in summer of 1941, and the first slack grills start coming off the assembly line in November 1941. I believe maybe the 6th of November 1941, something like that. 17th, 18th, something like that. But it's mid-November 1941. They start coming. And of course, mine is produced on the 27th of November 1941. And I think I think because everything was verbal, oral, and nicknames, that I think that some people use Jeep and they just referred to all military vehicles as Jeeps. And eventually that narrowed down to the quarter ton. And in some cases, they use the word Peep to differentiate between the Jeep, between the two different vehicles. So that's my take on it. And I would think that any military vehicle, quarter-ton military vehicle, that would be from the Bantam Pilot all the way up to summer of 1942, you would be safe calling it a Peep. Maybe even going into 1943. I think after that, then I think the name probably shifts. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't old school Army people who aren't sitting there. The military is all about language, and having its own unique languages, and then everyone wants to be an expert, especially a guy's been there 6 months longer than you. He knows way more than you. A fun fact to know and tell, the Army considered someone literate if they could read at 4th grade level. They considered someone trainable in the military if they could learn their new job within a year. So I ran across it today. So someone's been there a little bit longer. Maybe someone was in the National Guard in 1940, 1941, and they called them Peeps, and some new guys show up and they're like, oh, those are Peeps and those are Jeeps. Or maybe the guy's like, hey, these are Jeeps, they're all Jeeps. So there's no standard definition, but I think definitely Peep is appropriate. And again, that's why I called the YouTube channel the Peep Show, because it's really about early Jeeps and early military vehicles, and it's also a catchy title. It has nothing to do with the rapper, the emo rapper named Lil Peep, who died a few years ago. Don't really know nothing about him, and not really into the emo rap scene. And then also there is a British TV show that I've never heard of until very recently, and never even watched an episode of to date, called Peep Show. And also there's the current phrase peeps, hanging with my peeps, just means people. And then also there is the kind of gross Easter candy in all those healthy looking colors in the shape of a little bird named Peeps. I'm on the anti-peep club. So, the word continues on, but it definitely died out in terms of vehicles. But and I think you're completely safe if you call a Jeep made before 1940. And I would say you're even more safe if you go, spring 1942 on earlier. So any of the 4GPs, Bantam BRCs, Willys MAs, and Slack grills, and some of the early Ford. I think you're 100% safe. So anyway, that's my story. That's my thesis, and I'm sticking to it. So anyway, if you have any thoughts and ideas on it, go ahead and comment below. So again, if you like my videos, go ahead and like and share and subscribe. And if you don't like them, well, go watch something else. I'm not keeping you here. Keep your negativity to yourself. So anyway, have a good day, and I'll see you on the next one.